never saw you coming. They underestimated your silence, your patience, your bruised knuckles wrapped in quiet discipline. They mistook your stillness for weakness. But in the shadow of every storm is someone sharpening their edge, planning moves colder than winter steel. Steps calculated so precisely that when the final piece slid into place, it wasn't even a sound. It was silence. Dead silence. That was your move. That was your moment. You made the coldest move, and they didn't even see it happen. Not because they weren't looking, but because they never believed you could. But you did. You solved the whole puzzle, piece by piece, blade by blade, moment by moment, in the dark, alone, bleeding in places no one could see. You earned it, not with applause, not with validation, but with that sick hunger that burns when the world turns its back on you, when it forgets your name and mocks your silence. Every hour they slept, you trained. Every time they doubted, you planned. You didn't cry out. You didn't broadcast your struggle. You just built, quietly, mercilessly. While they danced in the spotlight, you walked in the dark alleys of your own mind and laid brick after brick. You didn't beg for opportunity. You took obscurity and made it a weapon. You didn't ask for permission. You rewrote the rules. And by the time they finally noticed, it was too late. The game is already yours. The piece is already moved. You already solved it. And they didn't even know they were being played. That's the move only the coldest can pull. One made from a place deeper than hate, darker than revenge. One born of clarity, forged in silence, delivered with surgical precision. You weren't just part of the game. You became the hand that flipped the board. They thought you disappeared. They thought you gave up. But what they didn't know was that you were down there in the silence, in the furnace of your own failure, hammering yourself into something they couldn't imagine. You weren't hiding. You were evolving. You weren't lost. You were tracking. In those months or years when no one called your name, when no one clapped for your efforts, when they laughed at your absence, that was the forge. That was where your blade was tempered. You suffered without posting. You cried without echo. You fought battles in your own mind that left you bleeding in the morning, but stronger by night. And in that abyss, something changed. You stopped caring what they thought. You stopped asking for permission. You started building a version of yourself so cold, so calculating, that when the time came, you moved. And they didn't even realize it until it was already over. And that's the secret they'll never admit. The most powerful strike is the one you never see coming. You made that strike. You solved it while they laughed. You connected dots in silence while they made noise. They were busy being loud. You were busy being lethal. You didn't just rise. You returned as something else, as someone else. You didn't knock on the door. You kicked it off its hinges and walked through like it was already yours. You didn't beg for a seat at the table. You burned the whole table down and built your own. You made your move so clean, so cold, that by the time they figured out what you did, their influence was gone, their grip was broken, their empire was dust. You didn't just beat them, you erased them, without a single scream. That's power, that's precision, that's you, the one who played the long game, the one who vanished only to return a ghost. But don't let anyone romanticize it. This isn't poetry. This isn't glory. This is pain. This is suffering buried under discipline. This is rage boiled down into strategy. You paid a price for this. In blood, in sleep, in isolation. While they lived easy, you went without. You endured cold nights with no hand to pull you up. You stared into the mirror and saw someone you barely recognized. Someone broken, yes, but unyielding. Someone shattered, but sharpened. You weren't born for this. You became this. through fire, through silence, through years of not being seen, of being overlooked, of hearing them say you weren't enough. That's what built you. That's what made your move the coldest. Because it wasn't just a move, it was the full release of every dark lesson you learned. It was your entire journey condensed into one perfect execution. And when you made that move, you didn't smile, you didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was never about showing them. It was about proving something to yourself. That you could endure it all and still rise. That you could fall to your knees and get up colder than before. That you could take the pieces of your own destruction and assemble them into a weapon. You didn't return to impress them. You returned to dominate. With no apologies, no explanations. You solved it in the dark and walked into the light like a shadow wrapped in fire. You became the answer to every question they never thought to ask. They won't admit it, but they feel it. They see it now, and it terrifies them. Because if you could rise from that, if you could suffer that deeply and still win, then there's nothing they can do to stop you anymore. You're past their reach. You're past fear. You're past approval. You became untouchable. So if you're in the dark now, if you're the one they forgot, if you're the one grinding in silence, wondering if it will ever pay off, remember this. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation. You don't need applause. What you need is fire. What you need is patience. What you need is the cold understanding that real power grows in silence, real victories are earned in blood, and real transformation doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. One move, one cold, flawless, devastating move. That's all it takes. And when your time comes, and it will, don't flinch. Don't hesitate. Make it count. Because they won't see it coming. They never do. And when the silence hits, when they realize what just happened, when they finally understand who you became, it'll already be too late. To those living comfortably, watch closely. Because somewhere, someone's in the shadows right now, bleeding, grinding, starving, not for food, for purpose, for domination. And they're building something you can't see. They're becoming something you can't stop. They're watching everything, learning everything. And when they make their move, you won't be ready. You'll feel it in the moment the world shifts, the moment the power dynamic flips, the moment the room goes quiet and no one's laughing anymore. That's when you'll know the puzzle has been solved. And it wasn't you. You were the noise. They were the silence. You were the show. They were the storm. You blinked, and it was already done. So remember this. The coldest moves are never announced. The greatest victories are rarely witnessed. And the ones who truly solve the puzzle don't need to be seen. They just need to be undeniable. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them a warning. You owe yourself a legacy. One built not in the light, but in the fire of your own darkness, in the cold calculation of every sleepless night, in the quiet mastery that only comes from enduring what most people never could. You made the coldest move, and they didn't even see it happen. But now, they live with the echo. You solved the whole puzzle and left no pieces behind. They won't talk about you in rooms, not yet. They're still pretending you didn't change the outcome. They're still telling each other stories to protect their pride, to cushion their fall, to make it seem like things were always going to go this way. But deep down, they know the truth. They know that it was your mind behind the shift, your decision that bent the outcome, your silence that cut deeper than any thread ever could. You made the move so cold, so clinical, so out of nowhere. It froze the air. People don't know how to react to a ghost. They know how to fight noise. They know how to respond to threats. But you didn't show them either. You just executed. One clean strike, no emotion, no warning, no trace. That's why it haunts them, because power like that isn't just rare, it's unnatural. It doesn't belong to the loud or the famous. It belongs to the patient, the dangerous, the ones who died in silence and came back a weapon. And this is what separates you from the rest. The rest chase, you build. The rest talk, you move. They perform, you disappear. They announce every step like they need the world's permission just to breathe. But you stopped explaining yourself years ago. You made peace with being misunderstood. You embraced invisibility. You wore the cloak of irrelevance like armor, because you knew what they didn't. That power is born in the quiet. That empires are built one sleepless night at a time. That kings are forged, not crowned. You stopped needing their attention because you realized your destiny was never going to be served to you. It had to be taken, stolen, created from nothing but grit, rage, and clarity. And that's exactly what you did. That's what you still do. Without witnesses, without pity, without compromise. They look at you now, and they can't explain the change. They don't understand how you moved from forgotten to unstoppable. But the truth is simple. You refuse to die. That's it. That's the whole code. You refuse to stay buried. Every time they left you in the dark, you grew colder, sharper, stronger. And when they forgot your name, you burned it into stone. Not for them, not so they'd remember, but so the world would never forget again. That's the move. That's the legacy. That's the silence that speaks louder than their loudest applause. But let me be clear. This isn't some fantasy. There's no fairy tale here. This is war. This is blood. This is the raw hunger to win or be nothing. This is the look in your eyes when the world tells you no, and you don't blink. This is what it feels like when every bridge behind you burns, and you walk forward anyway. You didn't get here by being good. You got here by being relentless. You got here by building a version of yourself that didn't need comfort, didn't need support, didn't need mercy. You replaced weakness with clarity, doubt with fire. You turned your setbacks into armor. You turned your pain into fuel. You became the weapon. And when that final move came, it was effortless. Because you'd already made it 1,000 times in your mind. You lived in the outcome before they even realized it was possible. You want to know why they didn't see it coming? Because they couldn't imagine someone like you surviving. That's it. They couldn't imagine someone being that broken and still standing, that rejected and still moving, that forgotten and still planning. You were a ghost to them, an afterthought, a failure, but you used that. You took their doubt and weaponized it. You took their absence and filled it with discipline. You took their silence and made it your symphony. And when it all aligned, when your moment came, when the final piece slid into place, it didn't make a sound. That's how they knew it was you. That's how they knew it was over. Now they scramble. Now they imitate. Now they whisper your name like it's a warning. But you're already gone again. Already vanished. Already planning the next move. Because one victory doesn't satisfy you. One solved puzzle doesn't complete you. You don't stop. You don't pause. You keep moving because the fire doesn't die. It just changes shape. You're not addicted to success. You're possessed by transformation. You don't care about being better than others. You care about becoming untouchable. And the only way to get there is to stay dangerous. Even in peace. Even in silence. Especially in silence. That's the paradox they'll never understand. Your power isn't in what you say, it's in what you don't. It's in the choices no one sees, in the grind no one records, in the decisions you make at 3 a.m., when no one is watching and there's nothing left but the echo of your own hunger. That's where your edge lives. That's where you became lethal. That's why your move was so cold. Because it wasn't random, it wasn't lucky, it wasn't flashy. It was calculated, planned, forged in the dark like a myth. And when it struck, it split history in two. Before you, after you. You didn't just solve the puzzle, you redefined the rules. You looked at what they told you success had to look like, and you burned that image to ash. You stopped trying to fit in and started building a life so sharp, so specific, that it could never be copied. You didn't just climb the ladder, you built your own tower. And when it was done, when the view was yours, you didn't scream, you didn't announce it. You stood there in silence, knowing the whole world would have to adjust to you now. That's power, that's control, that's cold. But don't let it make you soft. Don't let the world's awe turn into your comfort. Because the moment they start watching, you vanish again. You evolve again, you burn again. The cycle never ends. Greatness isn't a moment, it's a process, a curse, a fire that eats everything inside you until only the strongest pieces survive. You didn't come this far to be normal. You didn't suffer that much just to be accepted. You came to dominate, quietly, precisely, ruthlessly. And the next time you move, it'll be even colder, even quieter. Because they're watching now. And that's exactly when you become most dangerous, when they think they know you. That's when you change again. That's when you disappear again. That's when you move. And they never see it happen. So if you're standing in the dark now, if you're lost, if you're hurting, if the silence is loud and the climb feels endless, good. Stay there. Bleed there. Because that's the forge. That's where you become the version of yourself that makes the coldest move imaginable. The move they don't see. The move they'll never understand. And when the time comes, when the stars align and the path opens, you'll strike without sound, without warning, without mercy. Because you're not here to play. You're here to solve the puzzle and become the storm. They'll write about others. They'll talk about louder names. But that doesn't matter. You never needed recognition. You never needed headlines. You never needed anyone to clap for what they didn't understand. Your mission was never to be admired. It was to be undeniable. And you are. You're the phantom they whisper about when things shift, when power changes hands, when they feel the weight of something bigger than themselves pressing down on their plans. That's when they feel you. Not a name, not a brand, just a force. Silent, cold, absolute. That's what you've become. That's what they don't know how to handle. Because there's no defense against someone who refuses to be seen until it's too late. You weren't born with this. You didn't wake up cold. You became this. Through loss, through rejection, through every broken promise, every closed door, every betrayal. You didn't cry, you calculated. You didn't beg, you built. And that's what makes it unmatchable. Because most people crumble when things break. You didn't. You gathered the shards, sharpened them, and turned yourself into a weapon they can't predict. You wear the scars like armor now. You speak softly, because your silence carries more weight than their noise ever could. That's the paradox. They scream to feel powerful. You whisper because you are. When you move now, it's not for attention, it's for impact. Precision over performance. Results over recognition. You don't chase noise, you create consequences. And the ones who finally notice what you've done, they're already too late, because by the time they're asking how you did it, The board's already flipped, the room's already cold, the power's already yours. You didn't just win. You redefined what winning looks like. You made a move so clean, so efficient, so surgical. They'll spend years trying to explain it, but they'll never understand it, because it wasn't for them, it was for you. And now, your silence is louder than any victory speech. Now, your presence shakes rooms even when you don't say a word, because it's not about charisma. It's not about optics. It's about truth. And the truth is, you outlasted them all. You went deeper, stayed longer, hurt harder, and came back stronger. That's the price. That's the sacrifice. That's the cold. Because to make a move like that, to solve a puzzle that complex, to outthink and outlast people who had every advantage, you had to die 1,000 quiet deaths. You had to strip away the softness, the comfort, the illusions. You had to stand alone while the world laughed and still bet on yourself. That's what separates you. That's why you're here. But let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them tell each other stories that make them feel safe. Because that's what people do when they can't comprehend something. They minimize it. They reduce it. They try to explain it in ways that don't threaten them. Let them, because you don't need their belief. You don't need their fear. You don't need anything from them. You are no longer in orbit. You are no longer one of them. You became something else. Something they can't predict, can't read, can't replicate. You became inevitable. And you didn't get here by following the rules. You didn't get here by being liked. You got here by bleeding in places they'll never go. You got here by walking away from comfort, by choosing suffering, by walking into every room like the war was already yours. You didn't speak when they spoke. You didn't panic when they rose. You just moved. Quiet, controlled, unshaken. You learned to outwait the storm, to become the storm. And now that the smoke is cleared, you're still standing. That silence, that's your legacy breathing. Understand something. Cold doesn't mean cruel. Cold means measured. Cold means focused. Cold means cutting out the parts of you that wanted to be understood, that wanted to be accepted, and replacing them with the kind of discipline that terrifies people. The kind that doesn't flinch. The kind that doesn't blink. The kind that doesn't stop. Because once you've made that transformation, once you've truly crossed the threshold, there's no going back. You don't want to go back, because the person you were before, they were still waiting for permission. They were still hoping someone would save them. But you saved yourself. That's why you walk different now. That's why people pause when you enter a room. That's why the ones who used to doubt you don't speak your name anymore, because they remember who you were, and they can't understand what you've become. They feel the shift. They feel the silence. They feel the weight of a presence that doesn't need anything. Not approval, not applause, not even acknowledgement. That's the coldest thing of all. You made the move and didn't even stay for the aftermath. You made the move and disappeared. And in doing so, you became immortal. Because that's what real legends are made of. Not noise, not likes, not fame. They're made in the shadows. Made in the nights where you screamed into a pillow because you couldn't take the pressure, but still got up the next day and moved like you weren't broken. They're made in the decisions no one sees, the sacrifices no one claps for, the endurance no one writes songs about. And you did that over and over, quietly, brutally, without mercy, until one day the tide turned and the world changed shape around you. That's why this isn't the end. This is the beginning. Because now you understand the code. You understand what it takes to disappear and return as something more. Not just stronger, not just smarter, but colder, cleaner, sharper. Now, you don't just survive darkness, you thrive in it. You hunt in it, you own it. And while they're still trying to figure out where the light switch is, you're 10 steps ahead, already in position, already moving pieces they haven't even seen yet. And when the next move comes, because it always does, it will be even colder, even quieter, because now you've tasted what it means to be feared without ever raising your voice. You've felt the power of knowing the world bends, not for the loud, but for the unshakable. And now they'll never see you the same way again. And they shouldn't. Because you're not the same. You'll never be the same. You solved the whole puzzle, and then you became the puzzle. You made the coldest move, and they didn't even see it happen.